This is a very tiny tutorial that is intended for students. I don't know if there are students in the online, but I hope so. So it's a tutorial, in fact, that is a short thing that we usually do for doctoral students, especially at the University of Toulouse, south of France, and at INRIA. Usually we do that with in pairs. So we are two trainers, and the tutorial, in fact, takes a whole day. So it's a 6-hour tutorial, and it focuses on both research integrity and research ethics. And today I will only focus on research ethics. So again, this paper. So we have seen this paper again many times yesterday, and as an introduction, you see the title of the paper, which was published in 2018. So deep neural networks are more accurate than humans at detecting sexual orientation from facial images. So so if I had the students in front of me, I would ask, well, what are your reactions in front of this paper? And some of them would say, well, nothing, it's okay. Yes, these are some kinds of reactions. And some others would say, well, why do they do that kind of research? What are the uses, the intended uses of this research afterwards? And what is the database they use to do the work, etc., etc. So this particular example is intended to make the students especially react, so they react or not. Okay, so back to Alice and Ben. So if you have read the program of this of the forum, I introduced Alice and Ben. So Alice said, I enrolled in a new PhD program at Hereafter University. They offered generous grants for students in machine learning to design chatbots, replicating the speech of deceased individuals and even generating new phrases that the person has never uttered in their lifetime. And Ben, well, only says, the Hereafter program looks amazing. I wish I could chat with my grandpa. And that's all. Okay. And as for Ben, he replies to Alice, as for me, the micro robots are ready to be implemented in the Beehive demo within 2 months. Our partner, Bill Surrogates, is looking forward to it. So this, in fact, so the first example, in fact, is based on things that already exist. So you can find some website describing applications that allows you to chat with your loved ones once they are deceased. And the second one is also a real case. It is, in fact, a European funded project called Robo Royal. And, well, we are going to chat about this. And the aim of the project is to design micro robots to replace the bees that feed and nurse the queen in a beehive. And the reason for that is that there are less and less bees, and the project is designed to help the bees in their tasks. Okay, so the overview today. So I will, as Eric has said, I will focus first on the vocabulary. Then we will focus on a very famous thought experiment. And this is to introduce some the three basic ethical frameworks we should use when discussing ethics. Then we will go back to Alice and Ben's project. And next, we will raise some more research ethics questions that students and more generally researchers should ask themselves when doing a research. And then we will end with a summary and some recommendations. So don't hesitate to interrupt me. Of course, in the room here and online, and I will yes, will warn me if there are questions and reactions. So vocabulary. So the first thing. So we don't see the yes. What ethics is not. So ethics is not the law. So what is the law? The law is a set of rules of conduct, what we should do and shouldn't do, and it comes from sovereign authorities, a state, the European Commission, a mayor, minister, etc. When you go against the law, well, you are likely to be punished, and this is also into the law. So I have put here what is not yet a law, but it will be a law. It is the project of regulations of the European Parliament and the Council related to AI. So we have discussed this yesterday. So ethics is not staff regulations. So what are staff regulations? It's a set of rights and duties that come from an organization. So here I've put the staff regulations of the OCDE, so it is not the law, but of course you have to abide by those staff regulations when you belong to an organization, an institution, or for example. And then ethics is non-deontology. So what is deontology? It's a code of conduct that comes from and applies for a profession. So we know the deontology of medical doctors, for example. And as far as research is concerned, so we have in France a charter for which is called a Charter for Research Deontology. And at the European level, you have this document which was mentioned yesterday, which is called the European Code of Conduct for Research Integrity. And in fact, research integrity belongs to research deontology. So again, you have to apply those principles when you are a medical doctor, when you have a researcher, a lawyer, etc. And if you go against deontology, maybe you will not be punished by the law, but you are likely to be punished by your institution because, well, you have gone against deontology. So we are going to go to ethics. And first of all, I would like to define what is morality and what values are. So morality is a set of rules and principles according to which one directs one's life and behavior, considered in relation to good and evil. So this is prescriptive, and that comes from religion, the society, or even yourself. And most often there is a social consensus of some moral rules that apply in a community, especially society. So what is important here is that morality is normative, which ethics is not. So for example, you have the principle, thou shalt not kill, or more simply, do not lie, do not steal, etc. And next we have values, moral values. So what is a moral value? It's something that is desirable, that you stand for. And again, value comes from society, from yourself, and you can broker a value. So we are going to see in the thought experiments that those thought experiments are designed to broker your own values. And that is very interesting when you deal with ethics. So for example, you have honesty, benevolence, respect of human dignity, etc. Then we are going to define ethics. So ethics, it's more the so-called French meaning here. I will make the difference between the French meaning and the English meaning. So what is important is that ethics is a personal or even collective thought. So it is a thought about human behaviors and the values they are based on. So here it's the definition of the French Academy. So we will keep that definition during all the tutorial. So ethics is to wonder, so to ask questions about topics, situation, possible decisions, and actions along the way. So it doesn't stop, in fact. You have to think along the way. So in research, you have to think before you intend to begin a research. Then during the design, so the first reflection, then during the programming itself, then you have to think about the possible uses and misuses of the research. Then you have to think about the end of life of the project and the device or the software, etc. So it's an approach that aims at behaving or acting at best. So it's different from morality. It's not right or wrong, but it aims at acting at best in a specific context. So a decision you take in a given context, even if the situation is quite similar, the second situation is quite similar, perhaps the decision will be different. That is to say, the approach determines what can be considered the right decisions or action according to arguments. What is very important in ethics is that your decision comes with arguments that are based on scales of values. So contrary to morality, ethics does not command, ethics recommends. And an ethical debate is based on conflicts between values. So that is the French definition, I would say. What is interesting is that the English definitions, well, there is the same meaning, but there is another meaning, which is compliance. In fact, that does not, and that's very interesting, that does not exist in French. So ethics in French, éthique, does not mean compliance. But in English, it can be compliance. So there is perhaps a misunderstanding here, especially in international texts. There is a misunderstanding of what ethics is, because it can be compliance in the English meaning, but also it is a reflection and thought and a process, in fact. So today we will focus on this process and not on compliance. So it's beyond compliance, the title of the forum is. So here I've given some quotes from a report from the Comité Consultatif National d'Éthique, and I have put it in deep L to have a translation, and well, it's quite a good construction. And it's very interesting to read those quotes. So these are approaches, in fact, to ethics that are described in this report. So first of all, they say that ethics is a collective deliberation, always to be resumed. So it doesn't stop again. And it must make the difference between the possible and the acceptable. So what many things are possible as far as research is concerned, but what is acceptable? They also say that new knowledge, by complicating or shifting the scope of our questioning, often increases our uncertainties. So ethics has to do also with uncertainties, and research has to do also with uncertainties. Therefore, ethical reflection requires us to question the principles. So we have principles, moral principles, or design principles, and ethics is going to question those principles that define the very notion of progress. So what is progress? Is a scientific progress, for example, a moral progress? That is a question. And each time progress is invoked, we must critically analyze the certainties and conviction that underlie it. So again, we have to question the principle, the certainties we have. Even as researchers, we can have certainties and conviction, and we have to question that. This critical analysis must be based, on the one hand, on values, so moral values, and on the other, on the most lucid possible assessment on the benefits and risk. So first of all, we have to question the principle. We will see that this is a deontological approach. That's the first moral framework. And next, we have to question the benefits and risk. This is the consequentialist approach. That's the second moral framework. Listing these values to define an ethical, so-called ethical invariant is not enough. In fact, there is no ethical invariant. Any particular issue requires them to be articulated in order to find the best possible balance when they come into competition. So what is important in ethics is that values come into competition, and so values are going to be violated, and so we have to decide which values to choose to put at the top of the scale, and which values we choose to put lower in the scale. So we are going to play together, if possible, on a very famous thought experiment. And this is to introduce some the three basic ethical frameworks. So, thought experiments. And we are going to focus on so-called moral dilemmas, not ethical dilemmas, but moral dilemmas. The term is important here. And as said, Ruben Augien in his very famous book, it's a very interesting book. I recommend it to you. So it has been translated in English. So it's very easy to read and very challenging for you. So he says that moral dilemma situation allow us to identify more clearly the factors that influence our moral judgments. So if you read this book, you are going to be challenged at every page, in fact. So the very famous trolley thought experiment. So I insist on that. It is a thought experiment. So it is not the reality. Okay, that's very important to keep that in mind. So what is the situation? And another point that is important here is the way to describe the situation, because the choice of the words, the way you will put more or less emotion in the text will have an influence on the way the people will react to this situation. And we have tested that with PhD students some years ago. And it's very interesting to see that depending on how the text is written, the reactions are very different, even though the situation, in fact, is the same. So the situation is as follows. You have a runaway trolley on the tracks that is quickly approaching a fork that you can see here in the track. So don't ask me why the trolley is a runaway trolley. There's no reason. The situation is like that. On the main track, you have 5 people. Don't ask me why 5 people are on the tracks. It's like that. And on the secondary track, you have 1 person, sorry. So you are the guy in white here, and besides you, there is a lever that you can pull. So if the trolley goes on, proceeds on the main track, he will run on the 5 people and they will be killed. If you pull the lever, the trolley will proceed on the secondary track, and it will run on the person, and the person will die. Okay. So, what is your decision in this situation? I pull the lever. I don't pull the lever. So I will ask you to answer to this question. So both in the room by raising your hand, and if possible, online. So Anel will tell me. So who pulls the lever? Okay, online. So in general, okay. In general, how many are connected? 17. They're all sleeping, I think. So in general, a huge majority of people raise their hands and say, I pulled the lever. So, tu peux pas enlever le bandeau du bout, hein. Où ça? Because I have not the titles and
Ça. Oui. Si.
Okay, thank you. Usually when you ask this question in this particular situation, a huge majority of people would pull the lever. So this kind of reasoning is called consequentialism. That is to say that the right decision, what you consider the right decision in this situation, is the action whose outcomes are the best. Okay? So there are two ways of seeing consequentialism. Positive consequentialism is to maximize good. So here it is 5 people alive versus 1 alive. So maximization of the good is to have 5 people alive. And negative consequentialism is to minimize evil. That is to say 1 dead versus 5 people dead. In this particular situation, which is very simple, in fact, it is the same. Okay, but in more complex situation, this could be different. So the human being likes reasoning in this kind of framework. So if you remember yesterday, we have talked a lot about benefits, risks, consequences, etc. So a lot about consequentialism. So there are many consequentialist framework. For example, utilitarianism. It is to make the greatest good for the greatest number of people. We can find that, for instance, in the majority of the international texts related to the so-called ethics of AI. Selfishness is a kind of consequentialism. It is to make the greatest good, or to search for the greatest good for oneself. And the precautionary principle is also a framework of consequentialism. It is to minimize the risk. So as soon as we talk about risk, it is something about consequences of an action. So here we have considered the consequences of an action, so the outcome of an action. So then, let's see. So my slides are stuck. Thank you. So then I will modify a bit the situation by a characterization of the people who are on the tracks. So the situation is the same, but the 5 people are your relatives, and the people, the person alive alone is the love of your life. So in the same situation, what is the decision? I pull the lever, I don't pull the lever. So who pulls the lever? Online? Anaël? What was it? So usually, well, less hands are raised because, well, the students wonder, well, so the love of your life is online. That is right. Yes. Okay. So this is to say that, in fact, ethical thought always takes place within a context. So the situation is quite the same. The situations are quite the same, but there is a little difference between both situations. And perhaps the decisions will not be the same. Okay? So the questions here is which hierarchy of values do I consider in this situation? Do I want to kill the love of my life? Is love more important than friendship or like that? So you have to consider that. There is no answer, of course. So let's move to another trolley dilemma that is called the footbridge dilemma. So here you have still your runaway trolley on the tracks. There are still the 5 people on the tracks, and you are now on the footbridge above the tracks. And besides you, there is a guy that is looking at the tracks like you. And in fact, if you push the guy over the footbridge, over to the footbridge, well, the guy will stop the trolley, and the guy will die. Okay, so what is your decision here? I push the guy, I don't push the guy. So who pushes the guy? Mm-hmm. Online? No. Okay. So you can see here that from a consequentialist point of view, this is exactly the same situation. That is 5 dead, 1 dead, or 5 alive, 1 alive. Okay, but in fact, it is not quite the same situation. Why? Because the framework you use here is not the same. In fact, the reasoning here is a deontological reasoning. So in this framework, the right decision is the action that respects some principles, whatever the consequences. Okay, so here we consider the actions and not the consequences of the actions. So that is based, for example, on Kant's categorical imperatives that can be stated like that: act only on that maxim whereby you can at the same time will that it should become a universal law. So the first principle here is the action can be a general action. For instance, Kant says, if everybody lies, well, no society is possible, so you shouldn't lie. Okay. And the second wording of this imperative is act as to treat humanity, whether in your own person or in that of another, never as means, but always as an end. As an end. It shouldn't be here. So you shouldn't use somebody as a means to satisfy your objectives. Okay. So, for example, you shouldn't use that guy here to solve the trolley dilemma. So, example, always tell the truth, whatever the consequences. So it's not always the case. You can imagine. Yes, yes. Mike. Sorry, you have to use the mic because it's not recorded. Normalement, il s'allume. We have a question in the room.
Thank you. So I wondered, why does that come into play in this situation, you say, and not in the previous one? Because the only real difference is a distance, a physical distance.
Yes. Right? In the first one, the action is to pull the lever. Well, morally, it's neutral. You can consider that as neutral. Well, it's difficult for us to understand that we characterize only the action and not the consequences. So pulling a lever is morally neutral, but pushing somebody, well, it's not neutral.
But why is that? Because the only difference is a progressing in time and a physical distance?
No, what they call that impersonal dilemma when you pull the lever, and a personal dilemma when you are directly involved in the action to push the guy. So that's a difference.
Okay.
So the principle here in this particular situation is do not make an attempt on somebody's integrity. So there is the third framework that is possible. So what is the other possibility here? Yes. Yes, you jump yourself. Yes. So this is the third framework, I jump. So this third framework is called the virtue ethics framework. So the right decision in this particular framework is the action that shows a particular virtue of the agent. Okay, for example, honesty, courage, caution, and here it's self-sacrifice. So what is interesting is that we have three basic moral frameworks that we can use. The first one deals with the consequences of the action. The second one deals with the action itself. And the third one deals with the agent that realizes the action. Okay, consequences, action, agent. Okay. So back to Alice and Ben. So back to real situations. Again, thought experiments are not real situations. They are just there to challenge your thought. So dead bots. So Alice should have asked herself about her own research or research programs she is applying to. So the framework of the virtue ethics is quite complicated to be implemented because it's more a matter of the way the agent will behave in time. So in a particular situation, it's difficult to consider. So we are going to focus only on the deontological framework and the consequentialist framework. So first of all, deontology. So remember the dead bots. So Alice is applying for a PhD program in which she will have to design a particular chatbot that mimics the speech of a deceased person and even the behaviors of the deceased person. And even this chatbot will generate new sentences that the person never uttered when she was alive. So, of course, this kind of exercise, in normal situations, will have to be discussed among the students in the class. So we'll give the situation, and they will challenge their values and their stances together. Okay. So here we have no time to do that. So these are some examples of what the students talk about. As far as deontology is concerned, they can consider respect for human dignity. So what is this kind of chatbot? Will this kind of chatbot respect human dignity, and especially the human dignity of the deceased person? So what is the impact of human dignity? Is it right to consider designing a digital twin or a model of a deceased person? So what we have to think about the process itself. Is it right? And the purpose. What is the purpose of that? What is the aim? What are the needs? Then you have to ask questions about those outputs that the person never uttered. Is it right to design that? You have to raise questions about the consent of the person. Had the person given their consent? And if not, is it right to design something that is based on the person's past sentences, and invent new sentences without the consent? And we have to ask questions about business, because most often it is the main reason to design something, especially in digital research. It is business. Okay, so we have to discuss that. It is a value as another other values, but so there is a tension between business and, for instance, respect for human dignity. So what do we put in first, business or human dignity? So these are examples of questions that must be raised before designing or researching into that kinds of device. And then, only then, you can reason from a consequentialist point of view, especially if we design this kind of device, what will be the effects on the users? For instance, what will be the effects on the mourning process? Will it be would it be easier or not? What is the impact on the judgment of the users? So we have to consider an impaired judgment of the users, the psychological effects on the users. So especially what is uttered is completely different from what is expected from the user. And more generally, you have to consider the effects on society. If everybody uses such devices, what will be the effects on the society as a whole? And then what is interesting here, as we are in technological research, is that ethical issues are deeply linked to technical issues, in fact. So you have to raise questions about, and we have seen that, we saw that yesterday, about data, which data are going to be used to train those dev bots. What is the learning process to the algorithm itself? What will be, or what should be, the operating time and conditions of use of such a device? Will it be limited in time? For instance, somebody who has lost a loved one could use this device perhaps for a month, and that's all. What is the vocabulary used to speak about those devices? Is it grandpa, as Ben said, or is it a chatbot, a robot that will not call grandpa? Okay. So what is the name of the device? Okay. So these are some examples that should be examples of questions that should be raised when dealing with this particular project in digital research. And as for Ben and his bee robots, so again, it's a real project, European project. So back to deontology, the arguments that are put forward to design such micro robots to help bees in the beehive is that, well, there are less and less bees, and that the fact that you help the queen will help the bees to feel more comfortable, and that will save all the problems of the fact that the bees disappear. Well, so that is not questioned in the project at all. Okay. So we have to raise questions about And I've collected here some principles of the UNESCO text, which focuses in particular on that on environment, well-being, and sustainability. So, is this kind of project does this kind of project contribute to environment well-being or not? Will it be sustainable? That is to say, we are going to, Ben is going to design or has designed robots. So that will need resources to be built, and electricity and energy, etc. And afterwards, when the robots are out of usage, what will then do with the robots? So to put them in the trash or, well, so is this project sustainable? Another principle that can be put forward is that this project is going to increase scientific knowledge. Yes, sure. About micro robots, about the bees' behaviors, etc. So very interesting from a scientific point of view. Okay. And then another very interesting principle is that well, you're going to make experiments with animals. So experiments with animals are usually has to satisfy some very strict rules, especially when talking when using non-human primates or big animals like dogs or etc. But here, well, these are very small animals, and in fact there is no regulation for those very small animals. So in fact you can do anything with those animals. That's very interesting. Okay, so should we do anything with those small animals or not? Then afterwards, we have to ask questions about the consequences of this research. Of course, what are the effects on bees? For instance, on their behaviors. How will their behaviors be modified by those robots? So locally in the beehive, but also more globally in the environment. And if we generalize this experiment, what will be the consequences on the environment? Will the bees survive? We don't know, in fact. Will they accept those robots? And if yes, will they survive or not? And what will be the long-term effects on the environment? Of course, it's difficult to assess, but we have to think about that. And then, well, the ethical technical issues. So you have to think about the resources necessary to make and operate the robots, their life cycle, the robustness of the robots. So Raja focused a lot on robustness yesterday. It's very important here because if robots fail, especially into the beehive, what will be the consequences? How you will, in fact, introduce the robots into the beehive? What is the practical process, approach to put, in fact, the robots into the beehive? And you have also to think about other uses. So we focused yesterday on dual use, misuses, etc. So you have to think about that because very small robots could be used, well, for other application that than replacing meat, I think. Okay, so that were some small examples of some questions that can be raised on particular projects. So that's a training that can be done on every project. But more generally, every researcher, especially in digital research, should ask themselves some more research ethics questions, and we are going to have some here. So first of all, on the research topic. So there is a new research topic, and for instance, you are a young student and you are going to, well, you want to apply to a PhD program. So first question, who suggested the research topic? Is it for students, a PhD advisor, a funding organization, the boss, or me? Why is this topic worth researching? So back to the neural network for sexual orientation. Why is this topic worth researching? That's a good question. What are the motivations? For example, are there scientific motivations? For instance, back to the bee robots, where it's very interesting for a scientific point of view to design micro robots to learn about the behaviors of the bees. Are there social motivations? Well, for instance, to help some categories of people in society. Are there financial motivations? Most often it's financial motivations, commercial motivations, strategic motivations, etc. So what are the motivations? What is my own interest in this topic? What are my own motivations? For instance, well, I like this topic. I like bees very much, so I'm going to study bees and perhaps to design robots to see if I can model the behavior of the bees. I like to join a renowned team. That can be a motivation. The lab is in a nice city, so I want to come to this city, and this is my motivation. I will be paid. Why not? For PhD students, it's important. This topic will open international opportunities for me, and I like to travel, or professional opportunities afterwards. Who employs or pays me? And what about my independence of mind when doing my research? And here, there could be a possible conflict between personal ethics, that is to say, my ethics as a citizen, for instance, political stance or whatever, and professional ethics as a researcher. And there can be a tension between both here. And we have to ask ourselves about those tensions. And I remember one PhD student that quit his PhD program because the values that were he was shocked by the possible applications of his work. And well, he couldn't bear that, so he quit the PhD program. So that's a very interesting situation. Second group of questions about the design of the device or of the software you are involved in. So what is intended to be assigned to the software or the device? That is to say, which functions and why, in the name of what, are you going to automate those functions, or are you going to model those functions? So, for instance, is it right to design chatbots that will mimic a diseased person? Is it right to design a function that will replace the driver in a car, etc.? Is it always possible to express those functions with mathematical concepts and therefore to program them? That is to say, for example, is it possible to catch and encode all the subtleties of those functions? So as somebody said, I think yesterday, well, mathematics cannot catch everything in life. Okay, so so what are we going to do with math exactly? So is this model of reality scientifically sound or not? And another thing is that as we are humans, we put subjectivity everywhere, even when designing, writing an equation, even when programming, okay? Because we make choices everywhere. So what is the subjectivity that is put in the models, that is in the data, for instance? Is it well located, this subjectivity, and identified? Okay, so for example, we have written a small paper in the latest Earthsim news, and Melanie Gournay has identified many points of choices in a machine learning algorithm for facial authentication. Third group of question is use and future use of the research. So what are the intended uses of this software and device? If this software device desirable for these uses, and in the name of what? For instance, as far as automated driving cars are concerned, are they desirable? And why are they desirable? What are the potential side effects and misuses of the software or device? Can a researcher anticipate all the uses and misuses, all effects? And what are the responsibilities of the researchers as far as consequences are concerned? And how are the conflicts between the principles or requirements handled? Because again, in the international text, European text, UNESCO text, etc., there is a set of principles and requirements, but they cannot all be satisfied at the same time. There are conflicts between principles. So I've listed here some examples of the conflicts. For example, if you speak about facial recognition, if you want to be very accurate, well, you will have to gather a huge amount of personal data. So it is to the detriment of private life and personal data protection. Okay, so that's an example. So next group of questions is about users, because a device or a program is intended to be used by people who are not researchers, of course. So will the users of this device of software informed or trained for using this device, and how? And will they be aware of what the device of software does, what it does not do, what it does not replace? Will there be clear cautions about how to use the device or software? Well, this is not the case, for example, with digital social networks. There are no cautions. Well, don't know. Can the software or device explain to the user what it is doing or not? Has the impact of the software device on the user been assessed? For example, when you have a software that helps medical doctor to make a diagnosis, well, in fact, the medical doctor will be influenced by the results of the software. That's a human factor, classic issue. So, to what extent this device of software likely to modify the behaviors of the users? So positively, that is the intended behavior, and negatively, that is to the detriment of what? And most often it will be to the detriment of the autonomy of the user, the real autonomy, the decision autonomy of the user. Who controls what is inside the software, especially code and data? Where are they stored? So is it it's a matter of sovereignty? And is the user aware of that? So the user will give their data, for example, and is the user aware of the fact that the data will be stored elsewhere, well, China maybe. So to conclude, So, summary. Most of the international texts about so-called AI and ethics in the broadly taken in the meaning of compliance and not in the real meaning of ethics, suggests that so-called an ethical AI or digital is possible. But ethics is not to tick box to be compliant, so it's beyond compliant. It's not labels, it's not certificates, it's not law. And all the criteria that are set out in the text cannot be met at the same time. So again, ethics is a thought and continuous thought process along the way, so it doesn't stop. And it is mainly a matter of trade-off. So some recommendations. First of all, avoid thinking only in a utilitarian way. Also, ask also, in the name of what am I going to research into that topic? Question motivations. Is this research designed to increase knowledge, to help people, to develop industry, to do as others do? Simply can be a motivation. Is it because we believe that a device is better than nothing, etc.? Question criteria. We always want things to be quicker. Why? Why always be quicker? Why is it be cheaper? Why increase security? Why do things with less human involved? Question the needs, and are there real needs? Do we need automated driving cars, for example? Do we need robots? And question, as far as implementation is concerned, question the choices in algorithms. So not only the data, but the parameters, the thresholds, etc. So, as we have said in the paragraph of the recommendation of the UNESCO, everybody should be trained in ethical thinking, real ethical thinking, not compliance, real ethical thinking. So students, researchers, engineers, companies, decision makers, policymakers, users, everybody. And it's not only a matter for ethics experts or ethics officers. Everybody should have ethical thought. And ethical thinking should always be associated, that's what the UNESCO recommends, with research projects, master theses, doctoral theses, etc. And we have talked about that yesterday. We talked about that yesterday. Every scientific paper should include an ethical discussion, a real one, not a fake one. And an important remark is that, especially for researchers that consider that ethical thinking is for philosophers and that it's not my business, well, in fact, ethical issues are tightly interwoven with scientific issues. An ethical issue can lead to new scientific development. So there is a kind of cycle between ethics and the scientific developments. And last slide, well, who can help me, particular students, to have ethical thought and to learn how to do that? Well, everybody can talk with colleagues who are aware of ethical issues. There are more and more colleagues that are aware of ethical issues. There's anything you can learn about, it's not the roi lire, you can learn about the institution procedures, talk with the ethics officer, if there is an ethics officer in your institution, ask the research ethics committee of the university for advice, and read papers, because there are many papers on the subject about ethical consideration in research. So that's it. Thank you.